you ought to be concerned with. Moolah! You don't know how you're supposed to earn it, or what to do with it, or how to keep it. You're a freak with a dark, shameful secret. But you're not the only one. Get your hidden financial fears with a blast of sun. Now your healing has begun. It's Bad with Money with
Gabe S.
Done.
Hello and welcome to Bad with Money, a show about finances and feelings where we don't talk down to you. I'm your host, Gabe S. Dunn, and with me today we have Sabina. Do you want to tell my audience who you are and what you do?
Thank you for having me, Gabe. I am an executive coach and author of the book, You're the Boss. I work with C-suite executives around the globe, helping them in this moment in leadership and leading their organizations, and also do a lot of talks across different organizations on leadership.
What you said in this time, what is the problem that they are facing that you have to talk to them about leadership?
Oh gosh, there are some evergreen problems around leadership, of course, Gabe. And in addition, our times call for dealing with massive ambiguity and rapid change. So how do you stay steady? How do you manage yourself? And then how do you make choices about showing up for your organization, for the people on your team?
You know, it's interesting because I think in college, I had a whole thing where I was deeply involved in my newspaper. And I remember when you were a certain level of involved, there was talk of you becoming editor-in-chief one day. And that was like a prestige position. And when it got to be, I was assumed to become editor-in-chief. And when it got to the time to be editor-in-chief, I realized I didn't want it because what it involved was not what I enjoyed doing. If I was editor-in-chief, I would look like, wow, you had put all this work in for 4 years, but I wouldn't get to report. I would just be editing people's work. I would have to delegate stories. I would have to stay late, like all these things that I was like, well, I don't actually enjoy what you do as editor-in-chief. And so I chose to stay a managing editor and an investigative reporter. And that was seen as like insane. That was seen as like so crazy. But I don't think I would have been a good editor-in-chief as much as I was a good reporter. And I wanted to stay on my stories. And I think that is one of the big problems I've seen with bosses in my life is that they're promoted because they're good, but then they're promoted to something that they're actually not good at.
You're so wise, Gabe. And I'm imagining looking back, you think you made the right decision, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And so it's really hard because power comes with a lot of seduction. A lot of seduction. You have more autonomy, you have more control, you get to set a vision, maybe even get a bigger seat on that airplane. But it comes at a cost. And that cost is not for everybody. Just because you're the best individual contributor doesn't mean you're going to be the best manager. And yes, your hands are going to be off the keyboard in your case. So I'm glad that you made that wise choice for you. It's not the right choice for everybody. And if everybody realized that up front, it would save a lot of heartache for themselves and their organizations. Because of course, the power of somebody in that position, you have the power to create a great workplace, or you have a power to create a terrible workplace.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it has to do with the allure of power, but also the allure of salary?
Possibly, yes. It's salary. Now, there are some organizations that are creating a parallel track on the individual contributor side so that you can get promoted and have that higher pay scale, whether or not you're a manager. But that's not very common. I think in our society, it's still more about the management rank and the prestige of that.
Yeah, that's so funny because a lot of times the people that are doing the most work are the people that are a little bit lower down in the totem pole.
I think that the work is done everywhere, whether it's lower down in the totem pole or higher up. There's tremendous pressure higher up. The higher you go, the more pressure you face, the more responsibility you have, if you're mindful of that, for the entire organization and the people. Mm-hmm. It's just different kinds of work.
Or you become more visible in some ways. I know, like
absolutely.
I have a job right now, and the way that as soon as someone starts complaining, I I call over the manager and I back off is cowardly. But I'm like, well, they're, salaried and I'm not. And also, Godspeed to you. That's something that you know how to do, is assuage people. What I know how to do is that job itself.
The hands-on work. Yeah.
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 I've had good bosses in my life and I've had obviously bad bosses in my life. And what do you think makes like a good boss?
Well, Gabe, I actually don't believe that there is such a thing as good bosses or bad bosses.
I know. I saw it in your stuff. I saw it in your book. Yeah.
Yeah. And so therefore, this is a great question where we can go into that. We have both those characteristics in us. Anybody on a given day can have good boss behavior or bad boss behavior. And that's because it's not power that corrupts, but pressure that corrupts. You have pressure in your day. I mean, I imagine you have quite a few pressures in your life. Everybody does. And have you ever done or said something, Gabe, that you're not proud of when you were under pressure?
Yeah.
Right. Now, as a boss, when you do that, it doesn't just affect your own heart rate or your own health. It impacts everyone else around you. Mm-hmm. A little frown, and the problem is it gets magnified, right? That little frown becomes, oh my gosh, I better say goodbye to my office plants because here comes the axe. And that little frown might be, I was just suffering from indigestion. So it's that amplification in a position of power can end up being seen as they're a bad boss or a good boss, but it's our reactions to pressure. So what corrupts us is when we are not mindful of that combination of power and pressure. This pressure corrupts us, and then power keeps us oblivious to the impact of pressure because nobody wants to tell the person in the position of power that they suck, that their latest actions were not the best. So it's becoming aware of those and using those, harnessing those well, that helps somebody be more consistently demonstrating good boss behaviors as opposed to bad boss behaviors.
Yeah, I think positive reinforcement works better than negative reinforcement. And yet I see negative reinforcement a lot. People don't meet their quota and then they're demoted rather than, and then in my head, I see that happen and I go, well, why would they try then? That's what I've seen and what I know works with dogs. What do you think about, that for people? Like what would you say creates demotivation or motivation?
Absolutely. I mean, to build on your positive motivation and positive reinforcement, couples research shows that for a partner to perceive that their significant other has given them equal amounts of positive versus corrective, the ratio of positive to corrective actually needs to be 5-1 because we are so wired to see the negative. Think about primitive brains where we are wired to see the threat hiding in the tall grasses. So we discount a lot of the positives. When I share that with bosses at work, they laugh when I say 5-1. They're like, I'm at best 1-5. Because again, just as we are wired to see the negative, we're also wired from the boss down to see the negative, to remove the threats, to deal with the bugs, to deal with the problems. We forget that we're working with human beings, not human doings. And we've got to give them positive reinforcement, one, for them to feel motivated. But secondly, how are you going to do great work? You're going to do great work if I find how exactly you've done the great work already and reinforce that. Somebody once told me, can I give you some feedback in a class? And I'm like, okay, yes. And their feedback was, you're very passionate. And I went, okay, so is that a good thing or a bad thing? And they said, oh, no, it's a good thing. And I said, okay, so can you help me understand what is it that I was doing that conveyed passion and why is that a good thing for you? Well, it's a good thing for me because it kept me engaged. It kept me awake after lunch and so on. Okay, great. That's important to understand the impact on other people. And the reason I'd say you're passionate is because you speak a lot with your hands. Your vocal tone varies a lot. Fantastic. Now that's something I can bottle as a formula, right? And I can take that and learn even more. I got coaching on on body language and vocal tone, so I can use that to do even better. And isn't that motivating? So providing not just pat on the head praise, but actual feedback that says, here's how you came across. And when you did X, it showed up as passionate. And that had this kind of ripple effect on me and other people. Wow, that's motivation.
Well, the individualization of that kind of thing, I think more and more we're taught to be automatons, just doing, whatever it is. And why don't you fit into the mold? And why don't you, especially for neurodivergent people, why don't you do your job a certain way? Like, I have a friend who is autistic and does his best work at his home, but you're expected to, well, everyone goes into the office, and that would cause social anxiety for him. And, he struggles with, why do we have to do this a certain way that is like seen as normal versus the way in which I do my best work? Do they want my best work? What you're talking about is this lovely individual feedback, but sometimes it comes as like group feedback. You guys are not doing well. You guys are not succeeding.
Yeah. First of all, there's a problem with you guys. Where's the responsibility of the manager, right? As like we, and it's not that attribution that this is the problem with the scorecard is because you guys, all of you together are not doing well. It's more about, here are our goals, here's our results, here's a gap. What can we do to bridge that gap? How can we bring our best thinking to it? How can we bring our best ideas? I know all of us have different ways of being creative. Can we spend some time, like especially for the introverts, for example, you might give them a heads up. Can we come to this meeting with some thoughts about this idea? That gives someone a minute to think through if they're not someone who flies by the seat of their pants. And then that allows everyone to bring their best selves to work.
You guys know that I take testosterone and that causes your hair to thin, and my hair is thinning. And I want it to thin to a certain degree, but I don't need it to thin as much as it may end up thinning. So what can I do about that? And as you guys know, I have known about Nutrafol for a while, and I have been taking it. They were kind enough to send me some samples like a few weeks ago, and I have seen decreased shedding. Like, my hair sheds so much in the shower, and that always freaked me out, made me feel really self-conscious, like just would always think, is this too much hair? And after taking Nutrafol, I have noticed decreased shedding. This year, there is nothing holding you back from loving your hair again. Hair is so much more than what you see on the surface. It's a reflection of what's happening inside, such as my testosterone. Let Nutrafol target the key root causes of your thinning hair and help you grow stronger, healthier strands from within. Hair thinning is very common, okay? And it's very frustrating that it's kind of a new thing that's going on for me as I transition. And I need all the help I can get, especially because the shedding is so freaky. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. See thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. I cannot wait to get to the 3-month mark if it's already helping now. Physician formulated with 100% drug-free ingredients, Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting key root causes of thinning, okay? So they are stress, hormones, aging, nutrition, lifestyle, metabolism, through whole body health. Building a hair growth routine is simple. Purchase online, no prescription required. Automated deliveries and free shipping keep you on track. Plus, with the Nutrafol subscription, you can save up to 20%. You'll have access to free naturopathic doctor consults, and a Headspace meditation membership is included. While many supplements rely solely on ingredient studies, Nutrafol clinically tests final formulations to ensure their efficacy. In a clinical study, 72% of men saw more scalp coverage after taking Nutrafol Men Hair Growth Supplement for 6 months, and 86% of women saw improved hair growth after taking Nutrafol Women Hair Growth Supplements for 6 months. Start your hair growth journey with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month's subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code BWM. Find out why over 4,500 healthcare professionals and stylists recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code BWM. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code BWM. I have felt when a manager says, you know, you guys aren't out on the floor enough. You guys are on your phones. And I'm like, well, I'm not on my phone. Why am I getting yelled at?
Yes.
And, obviously I'm not getting yelled at. We've talked a lot on this show about how constructive feedback is taken as aggressive. But, it's demotivating because I'll be
Absolutely.
like, well, I'm doing the right thing and I'm not even getting singled out for that. So
I'm
whatever.
not being seen. Yeah, I'm not being seen. And we all want to be seen.
I didn't do it. You want
Right.
to go to the manager and be like a child and be like, not me though. I was good.
Well, and there's something there, two things. You weren't being yelled at, but it does feel like being yelled at because power distorts. It's like a broken volume knob. When everything an employee says up is muted, it's milder and cushioned in praise. And everything a manager says at the same time is amplified. It's more urgent, it's more dire, it's directed personally at us. It feels that way. So when you hear that message, of course it feels like being yelled at. And part of it might be then figuring out ways, how do you manage up in those situations? How do you honor yourself? How do you provide feedback upward? Feedback doesn't have to be unidirectional. Is there a way to share that upward, to talk about what you've been doing without sounding like a child or without sounding defensive? I mean, could you potentially say, when you said that, I have to say I felt a bit of a twinge because I actually make it a point to leave my phone inside my backpack.
I have found also, as someone neurodivergent, I have found a lot of my bosses, I've been very jarred by them having a sort of friendly, we're all friends. This is all, I'm talking to you about personal stuff. We're vibing. And then just kind of, they would literally turn to their computer, look at a number, and then turn back and be a completely different person. When I worked at a magazine, I had a boss who would be everyone's friend and then all of a sudden go into the group Slack and be mad at me. And I'm not, it wasn't my best work because I was in my 20s, but I was doing the work, but it wasn't my best work to reply don't talk to me that way, which I definitely did because he chose to do it in the group chat. So I chose to be don't talk to me that way in front of people, which made it worse. But, the switch that flips because suddenly you remember that they're not your friend, even though they act like your friend.
Right. And I think there's a fine line between treating people with humanity and also driving results. One of the things I hate in some meetings is where people start the meeting with, how was your weekend? If it's Monday or Tuesday, or what are you going to do next weekend if it's Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday? And the reason I don't like that is because most people do that as a way to fill time or as a way to check a box, as though they've been told, hey, ask about people's weekends and then dive into the business of the meeting. And it's a token wellness check, if you will, or a token attempt at connection. So connect with people genuinely, not as a friend, still as a manager, but connect with people genuinely. How do you show that you care about the human being and you care about the business results? It's not a switch where you're going from human to business. It's an and.
Yeah, because it is jarring because then you start to be on guard a little bit or
Yes.
you feel resentful when
Yes.
they don't do the work and suddenly they're just talking to you about their boyfriend or whatever. And you're like, what the hell? So I'm not allowed to do that. I think it is also in situations that are customer service, everything is so heightened because you're looking at the customer who's pissed at you.
Yeah, it's a high pressure job.
Mm-hmm. And that's different than sitting at a computer and being like, oh, is my email going to come across well? It's in the moment. I think I've really been good at reading people in the moment of what they need. And I have seen people sort of be very angry customers and someone handle it in a way that I kind of cringe and I'm like, this is going to make it worse. I seem to have the ability to step in and sort of give this, like, I know this is so frustrating, like almost gentle parenting, like a mean customer whisperer.
What you're pointing at, Gabe, is emotional intelligence. It's about, you had talked about wanting to be seen, and the customer wants to be seen and treated as human first. So yeah, you're frustrated. I see that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what we can do.
Sometimes also the only thing you have to do is say, yeah, that sucks. I mean, they don't see you as a person. They see you as like a customer service, whatever. Well, some do. But yeah, so it's like, it's interesting to realize that sometimes you just have to agree with them that it's dumb, or you have to agree with them that, a big thing is our website is not very intuitive. And so people will come in and they're upset. And so when I'm like helping them with coupons, I'll, if I have to click something more than once, I'll be like, I wish we had an app. It's so annoying. And that just like makes everything melt. They're like totally fine.
Yeah. And so as a manager, same thing, no different. What if you told the employee, yeah, I know this is really hard right now because we've had a cut in budget and you're expected to do more with less. I wish it was different. It makes a huge difference. Now, you were talking about motivation earlier. I'm more motivated to show up because I feel seen. I feel acknowledged. We're not painting it over with rainbows and unicorns. We're calling it as it is. And then asking on our better selves to help contribute.
Not only do I have friends who have been the victims of identity theft, including someone you know very well, my co-host on my other show, Allison Raskin, but I have also been doxxed. I've been harassed. I remember when I was working at BuzzFeed, I had right-wingers trying to figure out where I lived, posting everything about me. Privacy really matters. And it not just matters to me as a public figure, but it should matter to you as a listener, especially because I've had people in my personal life harass me too. Exes, things like that, estranged family members. Do you ever wonder how much of your personal data is out there on the internet for anyone to see? It's more than you think. Your name, your contact info, your social security number, home address, even information about your family members, all being compiled by data brokers and sold online. Yes, they can find out your address very easily, even old addresses where like other family members might still live. Data brokers make a profit off your data. Your data is a commodity. Anyone on the web can buy your private details. This can lead to identity theft, phishing attempts, harassment, and unwanted spam calls. But now you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. As a person who exists publicly, especially as someone who shares my opinions online, I am hyper aware of safety and security. And it's easier than ever to find personal information about people online. All of this data is just hanging out on the internet, and it can have actual consequences in the real world. That's why I personally use Delete Me. Delete Me is a subscription service that removes your personal info from hundreds of data brokers. I literally do use Delete Me. Myself, certain friends of mine, we all use Delete Me. I had it recommended to me by a friend of mine who's a sex worker, and she uses it to keep herself safe. I used it to get a bunch of stuff scrubbed off the internet. I promise you it works. It was great. They gave me these personalized updates. Like when I signed up, right, I gave Delete Me the exact information I wanted deleted, and their experts took it from there. Then they sent me these personalized privacy reports showing what info they had found, where they found it, and what they removed, which I loved reading because I was shocked at what they had found. So Delete Me isn't just a one-time service. It's always working for you, constantly monitoring, removing personal information you don't want on the internet. Put simply, it does all the hard work of wiping you and your family's personal information from data broker websites. I promise you, I use it. Myself and a bunch of sex worker friends, we all use it. They recommended it to me, and that's how you know it works. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me, now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan by texting BAD MONEY to 64000. Text BAD MONEY to 64000. That's BAD MONEY, all one word, to 64000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details.
How did you get into this? Were you just seeing a gap, or how did you realize that this was a problem or this was something that maybe needed a little coaching?
When you say this, what do you mean?
Learning how to be a leader when you're already in a leadership position.
I think came at it by being really sucky at it myself. And that wasn't always the case. When I first started as a manager running software engineering teams, often people told me I was the best boss they'd had. I cared about them. I coached them. Those were great years. But then once I came back from parental leave, the pressures of no sleep, no peace at home, and working with high-level executives at Microsoft, I went off the rails. I was micromanaging. I was barking out orders. I told myself, yeah, there'll be time for empathy later, which of course there never is. And that did not work out well for me as a manager. Of course, the worst part of it was I was clueless, because who's gonna tell me, especially if I'm appearing scary to people, who's gonna tell me the impact of my actions? So it took a while for me to recognize that when a colleague of mine told me, and that made me learn to reverse engineer what happened. How is it that the same person can be best boss ever and worst boss ever? How do we break those down? What goes on? How do we help other people do the same? Because I've walked in those shoes. So I have a lot of empathy for managers under pressure, under tremendous pressure. And how can you convert that from tension into teamwork?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of bosses don't realize that they're not liked, which I don't know how they would, I'm sure there's good ways to find that out and bad ways to find that out. But, what do you do if you find out that nobody likes you?
Part of it is recognizing that it's a feature of your role. It's not always personal. I mean, how many bad boss jokes do we have? Unfortunately, it feels inevitable, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's a really difficult dynamic to navigate. It's not funny, even though we make jokes. It's not funny to live it on either side. Look, nobody wants to struggle. If you talk to a boss, they're going to say, I want to do a great job managing my people. And you talk to an employee, they're going to say, I want to contribute. I want to grow. I want to learn. I want to forward my career. So we have both people on both sides wanting to do that. But then you have a boss who's unaware of the impact of her actions. And you have an employee who's unwilling to speak. So once you realize that, the first thing I encourage people to do is actually shut up, is to say less and listen more. And it often comes from the best of intentions. Hey, I've already been there. I've done this. Let me jump in and rescue the team, or let me cut that person short because that idea won't work. Well, maybe if you want to just stop, put yourself on mute and listen, you might realize other people know quite a lot and sometimes know different things from you that will create a better end result. You might also notice if people don't like you because you hog the limelight or because you're interrupting them, this will help reduce some of that. This will help offset some of that gap that you have created, that power gap you've created between yourself and other people.
Yeah, interesting. I just keep thinking about The Office and Michael Scott having the mug that's like best boss ever or something in the first episode. And that playing as everybody knows that he's not a good boss. I think, the obliviousness to that is sort of very toxic. It's also hard. It's hard for people to take feedback. I mean, you even have one-on-one meetings, and I'm sure people don't give feedback even in that one-on-one meeting. Or even if you did an anonymous survey, I don't think people give honest feedback in an anonymous survey either.
Absolutely. So exactly. So you're screwed either way, right? And one of the last things in my book, You're the Boss, is a set of 42 questions where you can self-diagnose, you can self-assess where you are. And I'll give you a few shortcut ones. One, as a boss, if nobody tells you an idea that's different from yours, or nobody pushes back on your idea, it's a flag. It doesn't mean that everybody agrees. It means people have actually started a secret group chat about how terrible your ideas are. If you justify all of your actions with a big yeah, but, there's a problem. If you appear funnier, smarter, faster than you know you are, because that's what people are telling you, that's a problem. So you can self-diagnose, you can look for some signs yourself by checking off these questions and saying, yeah, I don't remember the last time someone disagreed with me.
Yeah, it is a lot of self-emotional regulation too, which not that many people have, where you don't take it personally, or you feel like maybe it's your job to put on a bit of a face for the other people and not become a burden in a way. I think disagreeing too, it is hard. I think disagreeing, letting someone finish talking, and also not having an ego are huge, even outside of like a management position. And just like what you were saying, was emotional intelligence or the ability to self-soothe, which I have found in my life not a lot of people have, feeling justified in sort of flying off the handle.
Yeah, and Gabe, one of the things you're talking about is feeding our hungers for affirmation, for being liked, for being seen as superior to other people, for being seen as smart or a hero or a martyr. So how can you, if you have a need to get a lot of pats on the shoulder, for example, maybe you need to go, this happened to a client of mine. She went and took improv classes where she is good on her feet. She got a lot of claps and applauses there. And so when she came to work, she came well fed.
Oh, interesting. I've heard that before. I've had friends who've gone and done improv lessons for like workplaces and business people. And it's so funny to see that as a skill that other people don't have. When I I think I did that really well when I was on improv teams. So I would always be surprised when it's like, oh, we're doing a corporate seminar. And I'd be like, what? But then it started to make sense to me why people wanted to be able to do that, and why you would want the principles of yes and. I mean, it's funny working as a director too, because I tend to enjoy hearing what's possible or hearing different opinions. I don't claim to know more than my cinematographer. You know what I mean? My cinematographer knows what looks right. So I'll have feedback, but I'm not going to say, make it exactly like this. Or, I mean, at times the costumer will show me something and I won't realize that I hate it until I see it on, and I feel bad. But I'm also like, well, that's the job. But I also don't, if they say, well, it looks weird now, but it's going to read on camera, and it does read on camera, I was wrong, and that's fine. You want the best product, which is why it's so silly when people shit on DEI, because it's like, don't you want the most voices? Don't you want people disagreeing with you? Don't you want people, from other groups? If you're making a product, don't you want someone who's disabled to give you feedback on the product? Don't you want, this is how we end up with racist products.
Well, and that's, you've packed so many wise sayings in there, Gabe, about opening up, broadening your perspective, because if you don't find those problems or you don't design it right up front, your critics, your customers are going to find it. Where do you want to find the problem? Early on in its life cycle or later? And as a manager, particularly when people are less likely to tell you the truth, don't you want to surface that? So I often encourage managers to even ask questions such as, what would our competitors say about this? How would they downplay what we are puffing up? So that way, I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm asking you to channel a third party, and you might be more likely to tell me what's going on.
Oh, that's interesting. Or even knowing about your competitors, walking in and seeing what they do and not feeling an ego, but walking in and saying, oh, they do this kind of good. Like maybe we should have that. Or I see that with apps a lot. But also sometimes that's dumb, saying, oh, we're an app that does this. Let's add this thing from this other app. And I'm like, no, just make your thing better. I think ego is a really big problem and an indication of how people don't realize what makes them good at what they do.
Well, a lot of times what we interpret as ego is actually fear
Mm.
or a deep-seated hunger.
Mm.
My hunger to be needed. Because what if I don't put myself out there and speak a lot and hog up all the oxygen? Maybe I'll find out that nobody needs me. Nobody likes me.
Mm.
So there is that too. There's a very human side to it that can be hidden.
Yeah, that's true. That it is fear that you are not relevant to the project.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to seem like you know everything.
Exactly.
How do you deal with everybody being burnt out?
The number one thing that I ask CEOs I coach to put on their job description is self-care. And that self-care is not just for the CEO who might be burned out. Yes, their jobs are high pressure, high demand, and they need to do that. But it also more importantly, role models for the organization that self-care is important. We're not just virtue signaling by saying, oh yeah, work-life balance is important, your welfare is important, and then calling them on the weekends. We are actually walking the talk by saying, I'm doing this for myself. I'm taking time out, going on vacation, not going to be online, whatever that might be. When I role model that, that's what allows and gives other people permission to do the same thing.
And you have to give them the space to do that. And I don't know, I feel like hiring is so important because if everybody can kind of do things, then you're not, if you call out or if you need to take a mental health day or whatever, it doesn't decimate the whole operation. I think sometimes people want to hire less instead of hire in a way that keeps the schedule intact or moving. Because it's very easy. I find it very, it's interesting. I'm working this job and the amount of people that will say to me like, oh, we'll just call out. I'm like, okay, I understand that. I understand that it's like, a day job and whatever. But if I call out, that means that this person has to do the whole day. It's not me having any sort of loyalty to the company because corporations, whatever, quote unquote, don't care about you. But it is a think consideration for someone who you're kind of in it with. But if you have a manager who has scheduled, because I've had managers that have scheduled a lot ahead of time and have made it so that people are working in certain, having days off and whatever. And then I've also had managers who it's Thursday and we don't know who's closing Friday. And so you're scared. I can't plan anything. I can't do anything. Am I going to get called in? That's something that starts with hiring and thinking about that rather than just assuming.
Yeah, it's thinking about it more systemically and systematically is what I'm also hearing from you, Gabe. One of the things I did for a team that I joined, it was a small team, and so it was easier to do in some ways. I asked each person to go around and talk about one thing in their job that they love doing and one thing that they hate doing. What was really interesting was that the thing that person A hated doing, person B loved doing. And so we just did this swap. So it's not just the hours you work, the grind you put in, it's whether you love what you're doing. Now, of course, all of us have to do some grunt work that we don't like as well. But can we minimize that? And one way to minimize it when we cannot have endless headcount to hire is to do a matchmaking of what lights us up, and different things light up different people. That also helps with burnout.
Yeah, entirely. the idea of doing it fairly, where everybody has an equal amount of this or that.
Yes.
When
Yes.
one person hates waking up early and would rather close, and
Right.
someone else is would rather get off at 4:15.
Exactly.
And then this person has all closing shifts, and someone might say, oh, that's not fair, but that's what that person wants.
It goes back to one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah.
As long as you make sure if that person has all the closing shifts and someone else also wants the closing shifts, that's equitably proportioned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why I always say I don't want to be a manager. I would love to not be a manager, but it is funny because I do like being a director. And
that's exactly what I was going to say. And aren't you a director? So you do. So see, again, it might be the kind of work you're doing in management, and then other kinds of work, because it sounds like you really enjoy being a director.
I do, but what's fun is that, what's good is that if you have a good assistant director, a lot of stuff is handled by them, which is great. Like the AD on my film, something happened and all I did was look at her and she was like, I'm on it. That is invaluable.
And that is the benefit of being a manager, because you have a team where you can rely on each other and they've got your back and you've got theirs. When it works well, there are a lot of things to love about being a manager. And I wonder with the directorship, it might also be because you have less people to report up to.
Yeah.
So,
well, the whole world and
yeah.
that's what ruins a film sometimes too, is a lot of notes from up above where they have no concept. Like I've worked jobs where I worked a job where upper management and people that work in the office of the store were saying, oh, well, we don't have the inventory, so we can't put out samples. And I was like, I just bought and store used samples because I was like, I'm not getting yelled at all weekend. Like, you have no concept. You can say that to save money, but do you understand that means that we are going to have to deal with 45 people coming in and going, no samples? Because we always have samples. And so you can make that decision up top. But I was like, oh, you've never been to the store. And that's maddening.
Yeah. And it's also about then finding a sense of agency and how you give them that in-store experience.
Yeah, that's what I was doing, because I came in and I saw that and I was like, no, not today. I don't have it today. I can't get yelled at today. Like the inventory. Yeah, I think there's a huge gap between the people that are all the way up and they don't necessarily care or think about the day to day of what's going on in the store. Like customers are upset because they're like, it's fine, we'll just do this, or we'll save this, or we will have this product instead of this product. And I like see it and in the store and I'm like, oh, it's about to be a bad day.
And how often do you or other people give them that information that, oh, this became a bad day because a customer didn't see this or didn't have the sample or whatever else?
Yeah, I don't usually. It's interesting because they take Yelp reviews really seriously. And so people leave Yelp reviews, and a lot of the Yelp reviews will say, the staff is amazing. And here's what, I hope this gets the ear of management.
Absolutely. So this is a very, very common pattern, is they may care very much, but they don't know because nobody's telling them until they get the Yelp review, which is, of course, not the best way to know, because now it's impacted a customer, it's impacted your brand, and so on. So the question to me, more importantly, would be, how do we mend the boss-employee dynamic way down the chain, way up the chain, to have clearer communication, to have the psychological safety to be able to speak up, to have the curiosity to ask in a way that people are going to give you true information.
Yeah. I think I feel a lack of curiosity. There is a way I could make, I just make an email of my thoughts and give them to my direct manager. And just, it's interesting because it's the level of what actually I guess, yeah, putting together like what actually works with displays and then what I'm told, here's what the planogram is. And I'm like, this looks dumb. This is not what I would do. But, and like, I'm the one in the store, so I know that this is not going to work. But yeah, I think being able to say that.
In a way that they can hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think feeling like it's not worth it to say anything because they're just not going to
Exactly.
do anything.
And if they care about Yelp reviews, you might say, this particular planogram is exactly the kind of thing that 17 out of our 19 Yelp reviews
Are going to be
complaining
about.
Yes.
I know.
Or have been about. So it gives you data. You have data to build on.
Oh, yeah. Let's encourage negative Yelp reviews.
Right? So, like, let me tell you from past negative Yelp reviews what we've learned.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this would be a good idea as a result?
Yeah. I try to leave positive reviews of places that I liked. Now I really care about doing it. I didn't before, but now I'm like, I realize how much bosses look at them. And I think that's a little funny. But also, I would say getting the names of the people that helped you and putting their names in the Yelp review, that's that the bosses will see that. Where can people find you and more about your work and your book?
The book is sold everywhere books are available, and you can find me on my website, sabinanawaz.com. You could follow me on all the usual channels, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc.
The people love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is having a moment.
They do. And you could also follow my Substack. It's called Pressure Proof, and I share tips on how to pressure proof yourself, because we cannot really be pressure free, but we can use some tools to make ourselves pressure proof.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks for letting me rant and rave.
Thank you, Gabe. I enjoyed our conversation.
Bad with Money with Gabriel S. Dunn is a production of Noted Bisexual, produced by Melisa D. Monts and Diamond MPrint Productions. Edited by Diane Kang, post-production sound by Coco Llorens, production assistance by Melanie D. Watson, and music by Mike Kaplan, Zach Sherwin, and Jack Dolgen, sung by Sam Barbera. Thank you. Love you. Bye.